April 15, 1912, a ship far smaller than the Titanic cuts through the North Atlantic at full speed, Carpathia, racing toward a spot marked only by radio coordinates and absolute silence. No one on board knows si va a encontrar a damaged ocean liner or nothing but an empty sea covered in ice. Before we head into the rescue itself, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for every detail of this decisive encounter in 1912. As the night gives way to the first light of dawn, RMS Carpathia closes in on the coordinates sent by the Titanic. Captain Rostron keeps the ship at full speed, while officers check charts and clocks every minute. On deck, sailors prepare ropes, lanterns, blankets, and hot drinks for what could be a large number of survivors. The order is simple and direct. Everything must be ready before the first lifeboat appears on the horizon. The captain orders small changes in heading to skirt larger flows without dropping the speed too much. Officers with binoculars scan ahead of the bow and call out every sheet of ice that appears in their path. The sailors feel the hull vibrate as smaller fragments scrape along the sides. All signs point to the Titanic having struck an iceberg in this same region. That thought turns the silence on board into pure tension.
Right ahead! Bridge! Hard to starboard now!
Carpathia is now in the approximate area indicated by the last signals from the Titanic. Yet the sea ahead looks empty. No lifeboats in sight. No sign of human movement. Officers and sailors sweep the horizon with binoculars, trying to tell where the ice ends and shadows begin. On the radio, there are no new messages, only static hissing in their ears. The lack of any signal makes many on board wonder if they have already passed the window of time to find survivors alive. After long minutes of searching in silence, one of the sailors thinks he sees something that is not ice. It is just a dark speck against a gray line of sea, easy to mistake for a shadow. Officers are called. Several pairs of binoculars turn in the same direction. At first, no one is sure if it is a larger block of ice or a small boat drifting alone. Even so, the ship makes a slight course adjustment to move toward that point and treat it as a possible sign of survivors. As the ship gets closer, the small dark speck begins to take shape. Through the binoculars, some sailors can now make out a pale hull standing out against the water. The officers conclude it is not ice at all. It is a lifeboat drifting in the middle of the wreck zone. The captain orders the ship to reduce speed gradually so the waves do not capsize the smaller craft. From this moment on, every move on deck is carried out for a real rescue, not just a search. The captain orders a further reduction in speed and has the ship brought into careful alignment. Avoid waves that could throw the small, crowded boat off balance. Officers judge the distance by eye and adjust the heading so the larger hull will pass alongside the lifeboat without striking it. On deck, ropes, rope ladders, and cargo nets are moved into position at the access points. The sailors now treat that lifeboat as the first confirmed group of survivors from the Titanic. As the lifeboat draws near the hull, the figures inside it finally turn into faces. The sailors of the Carpathia can see people huddled together, many still in life jackets and evening clothes. The crew confirms that this is one of the Titanic's boats. Some of the occupants try to lift their arms. Others remain motionless, drained by the cold and the long hours adrift. The first contact turns into action when ropes and ladders begin to drop down to the level of the lifeboat. The sailors choose who comes up first, giving priority to those who look weakest. Survivors try to stand inside the small boat, many moving slowly and awkwardly because of the cold. Some have to be tied to a rope or placed in nets to make sure they do not fall back into the sea. Each person lifted makes the lifeboat a little lighter and the deck of the Carpathia a little more crowded. The first survivors from the Titanic are led quickly to interior areas, shielded from the wind. The crew hands out blankets, hot drinks, and dry clothes, trying to fight the effects of hypothermia. Doctors and nurses check blood pressure, pulse, and breathing, and prioritize the most serious cases. Some survivors are able to describe what they saw. Others sit in complete silence. As more survivors are brought on board, the crew begins to grasp the scale of the disaster. Their accounts point to a ship that went down completely only a few hours earlier, leaving hundreds with no chance of ever reaching a lifeboat. If you want to follow every step of this historic rescue to the very end, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us on this full reconstruction of that night in 1912. With the first group safe, the ship resumes its search for more boats in the same area. The lookouts now know exactly what to look for. White wooden hulls standing out against the gray sea. Soon, another Titanic lifeboat is spotted. Then a third one, a little farther away. Each new boat confirms that only a portion of the passengers ever made it into the lifeboats. The sailors move in a constant cycle, throw ropes, steady the ladders, help survivors climb aboard. The physical effort is brutal, exhausted men hauling up wet, heavy bodies in nets and slings. Even so, the crew keeps up the pace, because every delay means more time in the freezing air for those still in the boats. Little by little, the deck fills up with groups sorted by family, social class, and medical condition. While the rescue continues, some survivors begin to describe the night of the sinking in detail. They talk about the impact with the iceberg, the slow change in the ship's angle, and the moment when the Titanic broke apart. Crew members on the rescue ship record times, strange sounds, and the way the lifeboats were filled. For future inquiries, these first-hand testimonies will be as valuable as any navigational data. At the same time, many still cannot bring themselves to speak. As the morning wears on, the growing light makes the lifeboats easier to pick out at a distance. Daylight also reveals the survivors more clearly, many faces marked by cold and lack of sleep. The crew notices that some boats are half empty, while others were loaded to the limit. That contrast helps them understand how uneven the evacuation was between different parts of the ship and different classes. Among the survivors, members of the Titanic's crew and some of its officers begin to be recognized. They are essential to explain how the evacuation was organized on each side of the ship. They report the orders they received, the approximate number of boats lowered away, and the moment when the engine room was finally abandoned. These details will later be used in formal inquiries to rebuild the chain of decisions made that night. With more lifeboats rescued, the ship needs to organize everyone now on board. Crew members set up tables used only to record names, ages, and family relationships. Survivors try to spell foreign last names while scanning other lists in search of relatives. Some confirm emotional reunions. Others realize that certain names have not appeared anywhere. These records will be the foundation for notifying families on land and for calculating the death toll of the disaster. Some arrive in critical condition with severe hypothermia and extreme exhaustion. Doctors and nurses focus on warming their bodies, stabilizing breathing, and preventing sudden collapse. Coats, blankets, and hot water bottles are used as immediate tools, often in improvised ways. Each serious case is a reminder that a few more minutes in the water could have been fatal. With most of the boats nearby, the ship begins a final sweep around the site of the sinking. The captain orders slow navigation around the coordinates where the Titanic disappeared. Officers and sailors watch the sea in silence, searching for any sign of hull, larger debris or bodies. Only small pieces of wood, cushions, and loose objects appear between scattered sheets of ice. After completing the sweep, the captain concludes that every possible lifeboat has already been found. The head counts on board are compared with the Titanic's total capacity and reveal a much smaller number of survivors. Officers estimate that more than 1,000 people had no space in the boats or never managed to leave the ship in time. The crew of the rescue ship understands that they are the first direct witnesses of the Titanic's final hours. On the radio, messages begin to be drafted to inform nearby ships and authorities on land. The officers know that every detail they transmit now will help explain how a ship considered modern and safe vanished in just a few hours. For many on board, the return crossing stops being just another voyage and becomes part of the story of this disaster. With the area fully searched, the ship adjusts its heading to move away from the site of the sinking. The officers set the course home, weighing the ice ahead and the distance to the nearest safe harbor. On deck, some survivors stand in silence and look back toward the place they have just left behind. From now on, the priority is to keep everyone alive, warm and accounted for until they reach land.
Det spörstummet lä. Man ser inte stå.
Cabins, corridors, and lounges are rearranged to fit entire families into improvised spaces. Passengers from the rescue ship itself give up beds, blankets, and clothes for those who came off the Titanic with nothing but what they were wearing. The crew keeps constant watch over the health and the number of people in each section. At the same time, they try to preserve a minimum sense of order to face the days ahead until they reach port. On the night after the rescue, the ship sails far from the ice field. The stars return in full clarity, this time without the distant glow of another great ship on the horizon. Some survivors come out to the open deck for just a few minutes before going back inside. For many, the sight of the dark sea is still tied directly to the memory of the night of the sinking. The crew keeps the ship's lights low, trying to allow some rest without ever dropping their guard. Lists of passengers, crew, and rescued lifeboats are reviewed again and again to avoid mistakes. The officers compare the number of survivors with reports of how many originally sailed on the Titanic. The gap between those numbers makes it painfully clear that most people never found a place in a boat. On the rescue ship, that realization turns into respectful silence and renewed attention to those who lived through the night. At a certain point in the crossing, the crew decides to hold a brief tribute to those who remained in the sea. The ship keeps a steady speed while survivors and crew gather on the main deck. There are no long speeches, only a shared pause as every gaze turns toward the Atlantic. For many, this is the moment when the tragedy stops being just numbers and becomes a personal memory. Survivors form quick bonds with one another, trading stories and trying to piece together who was saved in each boat. The notes, sketches, and records made during the voyage will become raw material for future investigations. For everyone on board, what began as an ordinary trip will forever be remembered as the crossing that carried the survivors of the Titanic's end.